Hi, everyone. This is Mark Salsberry. I am the President of Customer Experience at QuestionPro, and we're going to go ahead and kick off this webinar. I appreciate you joining. Today we have with us Jim Beebe and Steven Salta of Luminetics, which is a customer experience consulting firm. These guys have some great background and very real-world experience they're going to share with us today, so I'm excited to have you on the phone with us, Jim and Steven. Let me give you a quick introduction. Jim and Steven have worked together for over 20 years at a couple of their own startups here, Excel Data, a technology consulting company, which was eventually sold to a publicly traded company. After that, they founded Ascentium, took that company from just an idea to $75 million in revenue, built largely off of repeat business and referrals. They were using NPS as a format for customer feedback at Ascentium, and they're going to share with us best practices that they not only share with their existing clients through Luminetics, but from their own experience. So Jim and Steven, excited to have you on the phone with us today, and excited to see what you have to show the audience. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and feel free to go ahead and share your screen there.
Thank you, Mark. Can everyone see our screen currently? Let's see. Make that adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone should be able to see the screen at this point. Thank you for that introduction, Mark. Although Jim and I are very proud of the rapid growth that we had at Ascentium, we're also very proud that when Forrester Research was looking at firms in our space, they ranked us tops in overall customer satisfaction, and we were delighted to get that third party ranking. That was just a wonderful outside opinion that we'd been doing something right. So let's talk a little bit about how we actually did that. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Net Promoter Score, but we're going to spend a few minutes here just giving you a brief introduction. Lots of companies do your more typical survey. You probably can't see all the detail on this slide, but you know what we're talking about here. This is your typical survey. It's usually 10 to 20 questions if you're lucky, and they'll go all over the map. They'll ask about quality, and they'll ask about professionalism, but they may not ask about the things that your customer actually cares about, what's most important to an individual customer. And I find when I'm filling these out that survey fatigue sets in probably about question 5. It's not something I'll start with the best of intentions, but by the end of the survey I typically will, by about question 5 I'll typically say, I'm tired of this. Unless I'm really, really mad or I'm really, really happy, then I might complete the survey. And we did this at Ascentium too, up until about 2006 when we switched to using Net Promoter Score. So quick review of that. Net Promoter Score is based on a single question. How likely are you to recommend my company to a friend or colleague, rated from 0 at the low end to 10 at the high end? There's also a follow-up. What's the main reason behind the score? That's it. That's the whole survey. And that's what we started doing in 2006. We threw out our older survey, we replaced it with this survey, and our response rate skyrocketed. People that wouldn't fill out the long survey were more than happy to answer a single question and a follow-up. So why is this question effective? Well, I think it's because it's really a heart question, not a head question. When I'm really asking, would you recommend me, I'm saying, would you put your reputation on the line for me? And that's really an emotional question. I think that's the tremendous power here. Now, it's hard sometimes to resist the urge to add more questions. You want to be really careful. Once you start expanding, you get back to the problem of survey fatigue. And as you add more questions, you really dilute the power of NPS. So we started doing this at Ascentium in 2006, and it put everybody on it, basically.
Yeah, I think you're in good company there. Just looking here at QuestionPro, we've got somewhere around 12,000 customers today who are using the NPS question type. So it is a quite popular question type. One question for you: is there anything that you would recommend that goes well with that 0 to 10 rating?
It depends on the business. Certainly, if I'm a business-to-business type of organization, I might want to do questions about, or a question maybe about service delivery. If I'm doing more business to consumer, there may be things that are particular to my industry I would try. But in general, once you open that door, it's a slippery slope to when your one question plus a follow-up becomes another 20-question survey again. So be careful there.
Excellent.
So how do I get a score out of that? This is called a Net Promoter Score. Well, anyone that scored you in a 9 or 10 are classified as promoters. Those are the people that love you. They want to tell people about you. They think you're walking on water. 7s and 8s are called passives. I think of them as satisfied customers. These are the people that I think, you guys are okay, but I may not tell you this, but if somebody gives me a better price, I may go elsewhere. And detractors, that's the broad range of 0 to 6. That's anybody from, oh, you guys are okay, to you're the worst people on the face of the earth. I mean, you'll get a lot of people, or hopefully not a lot, but a few people down in that end that are everybody from, oh, God, well, sure, you guys are fine, too. I really hate you. That's the power behind the second question. Now, in this presentation, we're going to focus exclusively on promoters. Not that we didn't have detractors, but that'll have to wait for a separate webinar. Now, the way the score is calculated is very simple. It's percentage of promoters minus percentage of detractors. Passives are ignored. So the score then will range from -100, that's where everyone is a detractor, to +100, that's where everyone is a promoter, with the average usually somewhere in the middle. Now I'm going to turn this over to Jim, who will actually talk about how do you turn a promoter into an actual sale.
Yeah, thanks, Steven. Well, as we've said, promoters actually want to refer you, but oftentimes, in fact, it's a pretty nobody asks them. Now, taking a look at this slide we have here, based upon Dale Carnegie, 91% of the people that really are your promoters would be willing to give you a referral if you would simply ask. But look at this, only 10% or 11% of the people actually ask. So, do you ever, and I guess, ask me for referrals, quotes, or testimonials? Do your customers are wondering if you're ever actually going to ask them, because you've asked them, first of all, would you give me a referral? And now you don't even take the time to go ask them. So, usually promoters are generally ignored. And this was true at Ascentium as well. We didn't ask the promoters initially. We got the score. We would broadcast our score, but we actually weren't asking them for referrals until we did something about it. So, Steven, do you have a story about this here?
Well, I think we've all got examples of this. For example, I travel a lot, and there are hotels in particular that I will stay at that I just love, where I will go back time and time again. They know me there. I'm treated well. I think the service is good. I cannot think of a single example where any place I stay that know I'm a loyal customer, that know I stay there all the time, has ever asked me, do you happen to know anybody else with your company who might want to stay at our hotel when they're in the area? It just never happens.
So, this is really easy money that most people are passing up. You take a look at this slide, and I'm not sure how entirely clear this chart is, but just take a look at the far right here. You have customer-employee referrals, which, as you can see, have a great deal lead-to-deal conversion rate, far outstrips anything else. And in fact, it really doesn't take any more time to do that conversion than it would for many of the other sources. So you may be wasting money because you may be digging in the wrong places. Not to put a lot of disparagement on this, but just take a look. Trying to get it from email campaigns looks terrible. I mean, it's the conversion's low. The time to lead from a lead to conversion's high. Trade shows, even a website is not anywhere near where it is to do a customer and employee referral. Now, don't take us wrong. We don't mean to suggest that you should get rid of your marketing department, at least not right now. But why not take the easy path and leverage these promoters? So, what's the rule number one? Rule number one is don't be afraid to ask. This isn't rocket science. It's incredibly obvious. But again, going back to what we saw earlier, only 11% of the companies actually do ask. So you might want to just ask your customers, thank you very much. We most appreciate your score. We're glad that we're able to serve you well. Is there somebody that you said you would refer us? Is there a particular person that you might know that we should call on or that you would refer us to? Now, it would be best, in most cases, not to turn over your promoters over to your sales staff who may not have a tight connection with your customer. You may want to have this done by somebody that was directly in your product or service or support delivery staff that actually knows that customer fairly well. And realize that when somebody thinks that you knock it out of the park and that your company is fantastic and they love you, it actually feels good for them to be able to share it with their friends. They want their friends, their colleagues to know about this, and to a certain extent it makes them feel good because they've discovered you and maybe these other people haven't yet. So, Steve, you had an example there I think you wanted to talk about.
Yes, I do. This always makes me think back on one particular client of ours who, this is a Decennium, who'd been a client for some time, probably about a year, and who just raved about one of our service delivery people. And that happens in services businesses. You'll get a long-term customer who just loves one person in particular. So we asked the person that they were raving about to go back to the client and just ask, as long as he was comfortable, and he was plenty comfortable, just to see, can you give me a referral? Somebody else inside of your organization that might be able to use the services similar to the services we've been providing to you. And that client was not only delighted, he did not just give us one referral, he gave us 3 referrals. But you do want to be careful. One of the fears that your customers have is the possibility that they're going to get a phone call from this guy, the sleazy salesperson. Now, I don't think anybody actually employs this guy, but it always reminds me that when I get a customer referral, I really want to treat it like gold. I want to treat a referral as a VIP. So we don't want to treat it like it's a cold call. This doesn't go into the top of your sales funnel. This may not even go into the middle of your sales funnel. You don't want to do any harm to what's already a solid relationship by feeding into the fear of the customer that they'll be thrown into your traditional sales process, whatever that process is. Within Ascentium, again, we had examples where we would actually try to pull in salespeople that were a little bit reluctant about stepping into an account where there was an existing relationship. And we didn't want to do anything that would treat this customer like a cold call. There's nothing worse than getting a call from a salesperson after you've given a referral from someone who doesn't understand the account, doesn't have the backstory, doesn't know the service delivery. You just want to be really careful about sending those into your regular sales pipeline. Jim.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Get a question.
This is Mark. I just wanted to comment on something. You talked about how promoters want to talk about you. I saw a stat just this week about that. It said that 33% of promoters end up telling 5 or more people about their good experience. So there's definitely that desire to talk about it. They may be talking about it, over coffee with their friend, or maybe it is on social media, but they are talking. We shouldn't be afraid to step out there and ask for those referrals, or maybe even direct them in a certain way. So that's great.
Excellent point. As we said at the very opening, your 9s and your 10s on the NPS scale want to refer you. They want to talk about you. They want to tell people what they've discovered.
So,
that's right.
Right. And, while we said it's, simple, you just go and ask for the referral, we also think that it would be good if you can be specific and know what you want, or maybe even a company that you might want to be tied into, or there's a particular person that you think it would be good to get an introduction to that your loyal promoter happens to know. So we might ask that you not just say, is there anybody that you know? Maybe there's a particular division within the company that you can ask for one referral. And let's just point this out. While Steven talked about the great example where we got 3 referrals from one client, don't be a pain in the ass by going back and back and back again, asking for referral after referral.
And this is a step that is underused at almost every place I have ever worked, including some very large organizations. When you do get a referral, at the very least, send a thank you card or a thank you note or a thank you email to your customer thanking them for the referral. Or, if their overall policy allows it, send them a gift card or send them a gift basket or send them a new car. I mean, just find some way to acknowledge their referral. That's critically important. And try to be, I always found it valuable when we were going back and thanking a client to try to do something specific to the customer. For example, we had one project manager who worked with a long-term client at a big software organization here in Seattle, and she would treat the client to a spa day as a thank you for ongoing from her recommendations. The spa day is somewhat unusual. I don't think we used it anywhere else, but it was a wonderful way of saying thank you to a client who had given us a great deal of referrals. And again, that only works if your customer's corporate policy will allow it. It may be something that you have to do on a smaller scale, and it may just be an email or a card, but for goodness sakes, do an email or a card.
Yeah, and I would have to say, I think for most people, if you, of course, email is what we usually use today, but it's very informal. And frankly, we oftentimes at Excel Data, we would actually do cards and actually send a handwritten card with thank you on it. And when you take the time to do that, they really know that you appreciate what you've done for them. So, kind of along those lines, we talked about getting the referrals and how to be specific about them, how to handle them when you have them, but clearly you need to make it as easy as possible for your promoter to actually give you a referral. So, you don't want them to just throw it out and say, hey, can you give me a referral to somebody? But maybe you can ask them to do one phone call, send one email, or one request. It's up to the customer. Whatever they find to be easiest. And again, like we said before, just don't turn this into a laundry list of things. If you can get one really good referral, that's a win. And realize, by the way, that your promoter, your loyal promoter, your customer may want to contact their referral first just to let them know what's going on. Great. Just make it easy. And also, by the way, make it easy for them to say no. They may say they're going to give you a referral, be willing to do it, but nothing comes to mind right now. So don't press it when they really don't have anybody they can refer you to.
Something else we see that's underutilized is the idea of a testimonial. Doesn't have to be a celebrity. In fact, so it would be nice if it was, but realize not all of us have celebrity customers. But it doesn't hurt if it's a name that people are familiar with. For example, here in the Seattle area, some of the big names we had as clients were Microsoft, Amazon, Nordstrom, REI, and they were actually pretty easy referrals to get from those big organizations. I'm sorry, pretty big testimonials. And when I say testimonial, it doesn't have to be something complicated or large or really involved. It just can be a quote you can put on your website. I'm always amazed. One of the first things I do when I'm looking at doing business with a company is check out their website. I rarely see, although it's becoming a little more common now, websites that actually use customer quotes and testimonials. It's great. It always makes an impact on me. If you want to go further and it's appropriate to your business, do a case study. You may publish a white paper, which is just a couple of pages around something you did for a particular client that includes a testimonial, includes quotations from the client. Those things are not done very often, and I think really separate out the customer-oriented companies from those that maybe aren't quite so customer-oriented. And believe me, a customer talking about your product is far better than you talking about your product.
Even if it's Ronald Reagan.
Yes, right. Although that's a hard one to get these days.
Yeah, so, clearly, by the way, when we were at Ascentium, and again, we started up Ascentium fairly early in 2001, and this was before the advent where social media really had the impact of social media. But so we didn't necessarily do a lot of this, but clearly, this is a way in which your customers can tell their best friends about you. It could be a Yelp review or a TripAdvisor, for example, if they're in the hotel industry or in the like. It could be a tweet, could be a Facebook like against your Facebook page, or it could be a pin. Not everything. You might ask them to do something, and make sure you keep it short again, and consider your business and your customer as well. I mean, what works best for you? It might be LinkedIn is more powerful to you, but that tweet that they might send out to all of whoever's following them, again, if they're in a fairly well-known industry and a fairly well-known person, that could be exceptionally powerful. Say, Mark, did you have any, I thought you might have some more statistics around this. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I want to share some of those. I pulled them up before the call. Just curious what the current tallies are. Just some mind-blowing numbers here. 1.28 billion people using Facebook today. Over 500 million using Google+, and then 250 million using Twitter, and then almost 200 million using LinkedIn. But you bring up a good point there. It's not just those social networks. You have Pinterest. Obviously, Yelp is a great one. TripAdvisor is one that the travel industry, tourism industry relies on heavily. And then restaurants. They're obviously you've got Yelp. You've got places like OpenTable that they're also collecting those reviews. So when you've got those promoters, you certainly want to get them out there into social media. And it may be saying something positive about your brand. It could also just be increasing your social reach, where they follow you on Twitter, or they like you on Facebook, or they subscribe to the YouTube channel. But these are great ways to get out there and make more of these promoters.
Yeah, I don't think that we talked about it here, but by the way, we did mention the idea that you could have detractors out there, and realize that this can also be a very powerful way for detractors to get out a bad message around your company. We're not going to talk about that right now. Again, if there's any interest in how you can rescue detractors, follow up with us later on it, and we'll talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
So, we talked about social media more broadly, but one of the things is we think that LinkedIn is your friend. Right here for many businesses, it's the ideal place where you can leverage social media. If you don't have one, you should get one. And while the LinkedIn endorsements are great. What's really most powerful are the LinkedIn recommendations. For a variety of reasons, we all know this. Those kinds of recommendations on social media carry enormous credibility. It's seen as very professional, and especially, again, if it's from a larger customer, a more well-known individual, maybe sits higher up in the organization, this carries a lot more weight. And of course, LinkedIn, is also going to provide for your person-to-person connections as well as person-to-business connections as well.
And we wanted to make our 9th rule, which is the last of the rules we'll be talking about, don't forget your own team. One of the things we discovered at Centium and at the other firms that we have started is that you get a lot of feedback, especially in our business-to-business world, about specific individuals. Single those people out, recognize them, institutionalize that recognition. You will find the behavior you incent, the behavior you reward, the behavior you recognize is the behavior you will get. We tried, and I think we went beyond trying, I think we were quite successful at this in ensuring that anybody that got any mention in any client feedback we singled out at one of our all-hands meetings. We might give them, some nice thing like a Starbucks card or something along those lines. It wasn't like a big expensive thing, but just some way of saying, nice job, thank you.
Right, and I think the most powerful thing about that, Stephen, was the recognition and the good words were said by the customers in front of their peers.
Exactly.
That was the most powerful thing.
And we realize that's not part of the culture of every organization, but it's certainly part of our culture. And it's a great way to close the loop and really remember, if you're in a business who's really people-focused, people-to-people focused, that if you value employees, they'll value customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, guys. I don't care if you have 5 employees or you have 50,000 employees. Those can be your brand advocates as well. And so, as you're closing the loop with your employees, and by the way, we're seeing this with companies that are implementing best practices for NPS in their organizations. You want to follow up with them. You want to share the positives. For instance, I'll bring in an example from Verizon Wireless, where I used to manage NPS for a part of that business. We would always go back to the employees and share those positive things in team meetings, broadcast them out, recognize employees based on that. You want to do that. You want to if this is a great place to work, which includes sharing the positive, then your employees are that much more likely to evangelize the brand as well.
So let me just add one more point in there, and perhaps it's a little bit beyond the scope of this one webinar, but you create a virtuous cycle here, because when you're delivering quality services to your clients or products out there, and it's recognized back to your company and your people individually, by recognizing them and rewarding them, you increase their employee engagement. And as we all know, increased employee engagement leads to better performance, better relationships and with the client base, your customers, which then again cycles back again, and that gives you more promoters, that then feeds back more positive information about your staff. So more than we can really get into in depth, but very important point. So just as somewhat of a wrap up here, we kind of talked about this, but closing this promoter loop, first of all, you actually have to do a Net Promoter Survey, right? So let's talk about this. We're all looking at how we can leverage promoters, how we can market with them to go to new customers, and part of it is starting out with the survey, figuring out and identifying who your real promoters are, making sure that you thank them appropriately for that. You follow up, asking for that kind of referral, whether it's specific, and make sure that the referral is handled properly. And it also could be either a testimonial, a reference, something put on social media, any of the ways that's easy for them. And then that just drives back into the Net Promoter Survey, because it's not a one-time event, right? I mean, Net Promoter Surveys, you're going to do with your customer base is either going to be based upon certain transactions, or if it's a relationship-based survey, it's going to be done on a semi-frequent basis, maybe quarterly or half-yearly or whatever, not too much, not too little, so that you now test it again, and guess what? You'll, again, be coming back with thanking them and getting additional referrals. So we did this at Ascentium. Maybe 5 to 10% of the companies do it. It takes discipline, but why not you?
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, guys. And I just wanted to provide a recap here from as you guys are consulting on this all day, every day. I mean, this is your business, and you're bringing in this expertise from your own companies that you've owned. We really appreciate that. I also wanted to speak to the technology side of this, because this is something that we're hearing at QuestionPro over and over again. And I just want to make sure that the audience knows, no matter what you're looking at, when you're looking at a CX solution, be that with QuestionPro or someone else, here are best practices here. You want that NPS question type that Steven and Jim talked about. I mentioned that we've got about 12,000 customers who are using that NPS question type today. Device agnostic surveys. What I mean by that is, we found it to be really important when you are delivering these NPS questions, these surveys out to your customers. You want them to work on the devices that your customers use. So make sure that you're choosing a solution where they work well on all devices. And then promoter amplification. You want to be able to, in that moment, give people an easy way to share. Now, they're going to do it in the real world, and certainly you can follow up with them, call on them, send them an email, and ask them for that referral. But instead of having the thank you page of your survey being a dead end, make that page the place where you can send them out to follow you or to write a recommendation on social media, places like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Yelp, and more. So those are some best practices as you're out there looking for a CX solution. I'd like to take it to the next slide here and open up to questions. We've got actually a few questions that are coming in here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up here. Gentlemen, the first one here is from Aisha Powell, and she's asking, is it a bad practice to examine your survey responses to find contact information about your promoters? Where does that fall on the ethical spectrum as far as following up with them and asking them for that return, for that referral?
I think it depends on the business. If you have a business that does more business-to-business work, I don't think it's a problem to call people and ask them directly. The way that we did it within our business-to-business world was, so we had a net promoter survey process that was outside the flow of the management of the company. So the customer that was getting a call would never get a call from anyone they knew, worked with, would ever be likely to work with. It was entirely outside of that particular flow. But we would read those results, and we would call the promoters to thank them and ask for that referral. And that call would come from someone with whom the customer had a relationship. That seemed to work fine. I can't recall a single objection. I can't recall a single ethical quandary. If you're in a business that has more distance with your customers, where it's maybe not sure who the call could come from, I think it can be a little bit off-putting, and you really have to think through how you structure that into the normal flow of your business and the normal engagement with your clients.
Yeah, I think probably a little bit might depend upon, again, the survey mechanism. Obviously, email is one mechanism, phone calls are another. If you're trying to sample a large number of customers, it really has to be via email. It might be most appropriate that you, again, use email back to that individual, again, from whoever did the survey, to ask them if it would be okay for somebody to contact them about getting a referral, since they said they'd be willing to do it. So I think you need to be sensitive to that. There are probably cases where people have asked or they want to have anonymity, and in that case, I think it's you got to be careful on that. But I think most of the times, again, somebody loves your company, they said they'd be willing to refer you, they're probably willing to talk to you either on email or on the phone.
Right. One of the examples I used early on was I do a lot of traveling and I stay in hotels that I like and I always return to, and I was bemoaning the fact that no one ever called me. I would be delighted to get a call from that hotel and would have no issue with them using my phone number. I would just be so happy if they actually called me. That has never happened.
All right. Good question. Very good.
Excellent. I just want to make one quick announcement out to the audience. If you have any questions right now, feel free to drop those into the questions section here of the webinar control panel that you see there. I have another question for you, Steven and Jim. What's your take on asking for internal referrals versus referrals to other companies? And let me set this up a little bit. I've done business in the past where you're working with one group within a large company. You're working with the engineering team in a large company, but you want to have an introduction over to the marketing team. What do you think about that? What's been your experience with that versus, it seems like you're connected to someone else here in the industry. We'd love to be able to speak with someone at that company.
I think it's fine, especially in the era where LinkedIn has become so popular. I don't think it's a problem at all. We did a bit of it. I think looking back on our experience with our own firms, we should have done more of it. I think it's a fine thing. I think if you do, as Jim mentioned earlier, you want to make it easier for people to say no. If they're clearly not comfortable, don't press it, but I don't think it's a problem to ask.
Well, no, and I would say that if you're selling to a large organization, you brought up Verizon.
Right.
We talked about Microsoft, or you're selling to General Motors. Really, those are almost economies all inside of themselves. I mean, they employ tens of thousands of individuals, and they have multiple departments. And in fact, actually, we did that specifically over at Microsoft, and I think we can talk about that. That we did a lot of work with the Windows division, and we asked for referrals into the Office division, and from the Office division, we went into other product marketing divisions. So I think that's a great way to actually get referrals. It's in many ways perhaps even easier for some of your promoters to refer you inside of the company to a different department than it is outside to somebody in a different company.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about what that looked like? You guys have worked with Microsoft quite a bit. What does that look like? Is it you feel like that's just a natural thing for them to do? Sometimes maybe they don't even know someone in the group that you want to get to. How has that worked out for you?
It's worked well. For example, we worked with both within the Ascenium world, we worked with a lot of technology clients and also marketing clients. So we got the chance to kind of go between those worlds, and we didn't have much problem asking for referrals inside of other areas of Microsoft. In some ways, Microsoft may have been easier because there's a lot of employee movement within the company, and somebody we worked with over in Group A would move over to Group B all the time. So the request was easy. The responses were invariably positive. I don't think we saw it as a problem. Now, I've also, in working with some of our other clients, encouraged them to ask their clients for referrals outside of their company. And again, I think that's generally worked well. Perhaps those referrals are a trifle harder depending on the business, but I don't think asking is a problem. I don't think in general customers are put off by the request at all. And I think to the extent that someone is really plugged in out there, you may get a boatload of referrals from someone that's ranked you as a 9 or a 10. It can be quite surprising to lots of people.
That's great. Another question for you here. You cited this on an earlier slide that 90% of these people will give referrals if they're 91% will give referrals if they're asked. That's an astounding number. But yet, you have to cite this other quote here from Dale Carnegie: only 11% asked. What do you think is that barrier? Why are businesses not taking advantage of this today?
So I think it's people are busy. People are putting out fires. People have other stuff to work on. They don't perceive it as their job. Boy, I think there's tons of excuses.
Well, and a lot of times what we find is that people are focusing on the detractors more than the promoters.
Exactly.
Right? So they're trying to fix stuff versus finding out and where they're doing things well. And again, don't get us wrong. We actually do believe it's important to try and rescue detractors, find out what's wrong or what they suggest you might want to change in your company, and in fact work on that. But in fact, I think the reason it's not done is because that's where people's focus is. What's not working well? What do we need to change? What do we need to improve? Versus looking on the positive side, saying, hey, this is stuff we're really doing well that these people love, and they may know similar people that would love the kinds of service we're delivering as they are, and taking that on. I think it's probably similar to a lot of times inside of a company when people are mentoring their staff. They oftentimes don't take their A players and really work hard with them.
Right.
They take their B and C players and try and improve them.
Children with A players.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I've seen that behavior played out as well, where you're just putting out fires. But these do seem to be the diamonds in the rough, right? You're looking through things and you're saying, okay, everything's fine with these guys. I need to go over here and make sure these detractors don't go out and damage our brand. But people are thinking about these promoters, and amazingly how likely they are to give a referral. 91% if we simply ask, if we start that behavior, develop that culture of reaching out to these promoters and asking them to go take that additional step.
I think in the majority of organizations, especially in large organizations, either promoters are generally ignored, or worse. If I look at cell phones, if I can pick on cell phones for a minute, I look at cable television, I look at internet services. The best deals are not offered to existing customers who love you. The best deals are actually offered to people that are going to leave. So I think that shows that the attention tends to be focused on customers you either are about to lose or think you're about to lose.
Yep. Okay. I'm seeing if we have any other. Okay, here we go. I've just got a question that came in here from Karen. This is interesting. The passives. Karen would like to know what your take is, what your approach has been with passives, or if any, and if you don't have an approach on that, I'd love to, what do you think about that? What would you do with those passives, or how do you advise your clients?
I think that's one of the hardest problems of all. It's a great question. I don't have a nice, crisp answer, and it's so case by case, so company by company. It is easier, and this is a subject for a separate webinar, it's easier to turn a detractor into a promoter than a passive into a promoter. We've got lots of evidence on that. Taking someone who's satisfied, who's mushy, they like you, but they don't love you yet, there's a lot of work and analysis that really has to be put into why people are passives, why maybe the bulk of your customers are more in the 7 to 8 category. They're satisfied, but they're not going to rave about you. So I don't have any we don't really have a 9 simple ways to turn passives into promoters. It's easier with detractors. We actually have a set of processes that are pretty standard.
Yeah.
Not with passives. Passives depend on the entity, the business, the situation, and the data.
That's interesting. Is that because detractors are they've hit rock bottom, their expectations are just at zero? We've just dashed their hopes, right, of having a good experience. And so if you come back with anything, it's like, whoa, I didn't think you were going to respond. I didn't think you cared about my needs.
It's a good first step. Just here, so I have to tell you a little bit more about Decennium. And here we've got lots of examples and stories. We could take up the next hour. So within Ascentium, either myself or Jim or someone in senior management called every detractor. And we didn't have a ton of them, but we did have people that would score a 6 or below. And I think that the customer was shocked they got any form of follow-up. B, I think they were shocked the follow-up came from a founder of the company. And C, I think they were always surprised that we weren't defensive. We never got defensive. We wanted to talk to them. We wanted to hear them out. If they were a local company and I was doing the follow-up, one of my first questions was always, "Hey, I'd love to hear more about how we can improve. May I buy you a cup of coffee?" If they weren't local, I'd see if I could schedule some time to talk with them when they weren't rushed. But I'd always want them to sound off on what they weren't happy about, and make sure I did not get defensive. I didn't start defending our company, which is a natural place to go. And the more they talk themselves out of being a detractor. It was absolutely amazing how often people would say, I wish I could take back a couple of things I said. So that was a good first step. People were surprised to be called. They were surprised by the seniority of the person making the call. And then they were surprised by the openness and willingness to listen.
Right, because I think detractors are, and I'm not sure it's rock bottom, but they're pretty passionate, right? And again, I think as Steven said, if you show the willingness to in fact fix what they thought was not good, and sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't, right? I mean, if there's a particular feature about your product, or maybe it's product pricing and you don't have control over it, you can't resolve that necessarily right then and there. But oftentimes we actually could, resolve things, and that was very, very important. But passives, it's very difficult to understand and to get information out of them so you understand why they actually are passive. And in fact, it may just be a personality type. Again, we don't have any answer there. We are just noting that detractors are a little bit easier to convert.
Right, and I think with passives, it really depends on the industry. It really depends on the company. It really depends on the circumstances, and I would look long and hard at the data. When you say what's the main reason behind the score for a passive, one of the things that we tried to do, we try to do when we implement this survey within our clients, is to say, okay, if the person can be drawn out in terms of giving you one positive and a negative, that's data to work with. So this is one example where it's incredibly valuable to have the data.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right, we've got about 10 minutes left. I've got one more question here from Simon, and Simon would like to know how reproducible NPS is over a period of time for tracking purposes. As you're looking at the responses come in over time. He says, I'm guessing that a good base size helps. Do you have any direction for the audience, when it comes to looking at your scores over time and how that impacts the organization, how you manage to it?
Sure. When we first started doing this with our consulting firm, we started to get, I'd say, highly actionable data with a sample size that was probably 30-ish. So that's a pretty small number. And it's a consulting firm. It's business to business. So we would measure our customers in the hundreds. So starting with 30 wasn't a bad sample size to start with, and over time we were able to get hundreds or even thousands of data points, and it is more is better. But it is very reproducible, and the more data you can get, the better. One of the things so I'm going to tell you what our score was when we first started doing it and how we managed to change the score over time with our own company, although this is really different depending on the industry our client's in. So within the professional services industry, when we started out, our score was 42. And I think that's a good score for professional services. I'd probably give it a B. Over time, by actually activating promoters, working with detractors, turning detractors into promoters, we were able to get that score consistently. It took a year or two into the 60s, and that's where it stayed for most of the time. Now, in professional services, I think being in the 60s is an A or an A+. I think it's a phenomenal score. And not to say I didn't drop on occasion, but we had well-defined processes, and we encourage our clients to have well-defined processes around responding to promoters and detractors that drive the score up over time. That said, I don't think the score should be anyone's primary focus. I think what you learn from the second question, the what's the main reason behind that score, gives you the actionable data that will change your company.
Well, I would say yes, but clearly you want to see this score hopefully move over time, and it's the tracking of it over time ensures that you're staying on track with your product, your services, your support to the customer, that's working well. So while maybe the score isn't clearly actionable in and of itself, it's part of the dashboard that makes sure and tells you that you're going in the right direction.
Yes, and obviously if you've been scoring in the 60s, and we recommend using the score as a 90-day rolling average. So collect your score for at least 90 days before you start reporting anything, and then report it as a 90-day rolling average going forward. You can use other metrics as well, but we think that metric is a good place to start.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up now. I want to make a quick announcement out to everyone. I had a few questions come in here. Is the session being recorded? I just want everyone to know the session has been recorded, and we'll send out the recording to everyone after the call. Thank you so much for attending, everyone. Jim, Steven, thank you so much for bringing your expertise here. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to hearing from any of you who are on the call. Our contact information is here. If you'd like to follow up with any questions, we'd be more than happy to talk with you. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.